Hi Year 4 and welcome to another reading session. Now last week you read chapter 6 with Mr. Channing and found out at the end of chapter 6, hopefully, that Michael was attacked by a jellyfish, which is very scary. If anyone's ever had a jellyfish sting before, you'll know it's very painful. So we found that out, and just before, actually I wanted to say one thing. A week before that, I did a reading session and lots of people fed back to me and said that I was wearing some rather silly clothes, and I was a little bit confused by that because I couldn't think about what I was wearing that was ridiculous. So this week I've definitely made an effort to make sure that I'm not wearing anything silly at all, and we're just going to be reading very seriously. This is chapter 7 and this is called All That Silence Said. Okay, so you can see there's a picture there of the jellyfish Michael and Kensuke. Let's find out what happens. Okay, here we go. Chapter 7. All That Silence Said. I smelt vinegar and thought I was home. My father always brought us back fish and chips for supper on Fridays, and he loved to soak his in vinegar. The whole house would stink of it all evening. I love the smell of vinegar. I opened my eyes. It was dark enough to be evening, but I was not at home. I was in a cave. But not my cave. I could smell smoke too. I was lying on a sleeping mat covered in a sheet up to my chin. I tried to look up, to sit up, to look about me, but I could not move. I tried to turn my neck. I couldn't. I could move nothing except my eyes. I could feel, though. My skin, my whole body throbbed with searing pain, as if I'd been scalded all over. I tried to call out, but could barely manage a whisper. Then I remembered the jellyfish. I remembered it all. The old man was bending over me, his hands soothing on my forehead. "You better now," he said. "My name Kensuke. You better now." I wanted to ask after Stella. She answered for herself by sticking her cold nose into my ear. I do not know for how many days I lay there, drifting in and out of sleep, only that whenever I woke, Kensuke was always there sitting beside me. He rarely spoke, and I could not speak, but the silence between us said more than any words. My erstwhile enemy, my captor, had just become my saviour. He would lift me to pour fruit juice or warm soup down my throat. He would sponge me down with cooling water, and when the pain was so bad that I cried out, he would hold me and sing me softly back to sleep. It was strange. When he sang to me, it was like an echo from the past, of my father's voice perhaps. I didn't know. Slowly the pain left me. Tenderly he nursed me back to life. The day my fingers first moved was the very first time I ever saw him smile. When at last I was able to turn my neck, I would watch him as he came and went, as he busied himself about the cave. Stella would often come and lie beside me, her eyes following him too. Every day now I was able to see more of where I was. In comparison with my cave down the beach, this place was vast. Apart from the roof of vaulted rock above, you would scarcely have known it was a cave. There was nothing rudimentary about it at all. It looked more like an open-plan house than a cave. Kitchen, sitting room, studio, bedroom, all in one space. He cooked over a small fire which smoked continuously at the back of the cave, the smoke rising through a small cleft high in the rocks above. A possible reason, I thought, why there were no mosquitoes to bother me. There always seemed to be something hanging from a wooden tripod over the fire. Either a blackened pot or what looked like and smelled like long strips of smoked fish. I could see the dark gleam of metal pots and pans lined up on a nearby wooden shelf. There were other shelves too, lined with tins and jars, dozens of them of all sizes and shapes, and hanging beneath them innumerable bunches of dried herbs and flowers. These he would often be mixing or pounding, but I wasn't sure what for. Sometimes he would bring them over to me so that I could smell them. The cave house was sparsely furnished. To one side of the cave mouth stood a low wooden table, barely a foot off the ground. Here he kept his paintbrushes, always neatly laid out, and several more jars and bottles and saucers too. Kensuke lived and worked almost entirely near the mouth of the cave house where there was daylight. At nights he would roll out his sleeping mat across the cave from me, up against the far wall. I would wake in the early mornings sometimes and just watch him sleeping. He always lay on his back wrapped in a sheet and never moved a muscle. Kensuke would spend many hours of every day kneeling at the table and painting. He painted on large shells, but much to my disappointment, he never showed me what he had done. Indeed, he rarely seemed pleased with his work, but just as soon as he had finished, he would usually wash off what he had done and start off again. On the far side of the cave mouth was a long workbench, and hanging above it an array of tools, saws, hammers, chisels, all sorts. And beyond the workbench were 3 large wooden chests in which he would frequently rummage around for a shell, perhaps, or a clean sheet. We had clean sheets every night. Inside the cave he wore a wraparound dressing gown, a kimono as I later knew it to be. He kept the cave house immaculately clean, sweeping it down once a day at least. There was a large bowl of water just inside the cave mouth. Every time he came in, he would wash his feet and dry them before stepping inside. The floor was entirely covered with mats made of woven rushes like our sleeping mats, and everywhere, all around the cave to a head height and above, the walls were lined with bamboo. It was simple, but it was a home. There was no clutter. Everything had its place and its purpose. As I got better, Kensuke would go off and leave me on my own more and more, but thankfully never for too long. He'd return later, very often singing with fish, perhaps fruit, coconuts or herbs, which he'd bring to show me proudly. The orangutans would sometime come with him, but only as far as the cave mouth. They'd peer in at me and at Stella, who always kept her distance from them. Only the young ones ever tried to venture in, and then Kensuke only had to clap at them and they'd soon go scooting off. During those early days in the cave house, I so much wished we could talk. There were 1,000 mysteries, 1,000 things I wanted to know, but it still hurt me to talk, and besides I felt he was quite happy with our silence, and that he preferred it somehow. He seemed a very private person and content to be that way. Then one day, after hours of kneeling hunched over one of his paintings, he came over and gave it to me. It was a picture of a tree in blossom. His smile said everything. "For you, Japan tree," he said. "I, Japanese person." After that, Kensuke showed me all the paintings he did, even the ones he later washed off. Just a little side note here, guys, if you ever want to see what a painting like that looks like, it's very famous. All you have to do is search or Google for like a Japanese blossom tree. Very lovely. They were all in black and white wash of orangutans, gibbons, butterflies, dolphins and birds and fruit. Only very occasionally did he keep one, storing it away carefully in one of his chests. He did keep several of the tree paintings, I noticed, always of a tree in blossom, a Japan tree, as he called it, and I could see he took particular joy in showing me these. It was clear he was allowing me to share something very dear to him. I felt honoured by that. In the dying light of each day, he would sit beside me and watch over me, the last of the evening sun on his face. I felt he was healing me with his eyes. At night, I thought often of my mother and father. I so much wanted to see them again, to let them know I was still alive, but strangely, I no longer missed them. In time, I found my voice again. The paralysis gradually lost its grip on me, and my strength flowed back. Now I could go out with Kensuke whenever he invited me, and he often did. To begin with, I would squat on the beach with Stella and watch him spearfishing in the shallows. So still he stood, and his strike was lightning fast. Then one day he made me my own spear. I was to fish with him. He taught me where the bigger fish were, where the octopus hid under the rocks, how to stand still as a heron and wait, spear poised just above the water, my shadow falling behind me so that the fish were not frightened away. I tell you, spearing a fish for the first time was like scoring a winning goal for the mudlarks back home. just about the best feeling in the world. Right, I'm going to leave it there, and I want you to guys, so I've finished on page 106, and I want you guys to answer some questions that I'm going to put on the slides for you about that reading, okay? And we'll find out about the rest of the chapter later. See you later.